All right, so we're here on part 3 of our KX500 never-ending project. Now, if you've missed any of the other parts, this doesn't really matter. If you're just into the engine on a 2-stroke, we're going to give you a really good inside look at this KX500 engine going together. A lot of it will pertain to any 2-stroke you're rebuilding. And now in this case, what we did, this is a 91, so it's really old, 20-year-old engine. And so we went through, we got the cases cleaned up, all vapor blasted, as you saw, that was in our last videos. And we have the cases ready to assemble. We kind of cheated a bit, heated up the cases. After they're all clean, put in our new bearings and seals throughout the engine. As you can see, our cases are just ready to assemble. All ready, all the seals are in, ready to go to help kind of speed up the video a bit. Now, we did a bunch of cool things while we had this apart. See, this is kind of the old style KX cover. No way to get to the clutch. We went with one of this right here, and this is KX Guru made this up for us. A guy named Alex Ward there with KX Guru, and KX450 bolt pattern here. Henson cover on here, it's like a 15 or so KX450 cover we can put on here that they've machined on here. Now we're gonna be able to inspect the clutch whenever we want on this KX500. Gives it a way more modern look. Really cool setup. There's the actual cover we'll be using on our clutch cover there. Now, one of the things we did here, here's our KX500 cylinder here. You can see TMR, that's Tom Morgan Racing. He went ahead through and cleaned up the cylinder, which was needed to be cleaned up. He also ported it. You're like, why do you need it more fast when it's already a KX500? Well, we want to make it run good, and why not, I guess. But it's also going to make it a little bit easier to ride. On the head, Tom Morgan puts a little decomp in here, which is really cool. You just pull this out like this, boom, and it's going to help you be able to kick this thing with a decomp, and then it'll fall in when it's running. So really cool setup. He's modified the head as well. It's all ready to go on here with assembly. Our cases are ready. Our clutch is ready. We're going to get our clutch plates. We've got our new Henson clutch plates. We're going to get those soaking in oil right now. Our crankshaft that Tom Morgan, he modified the crankshaft and balanced it to the new piston. So we have the crankshaft in the freezer right now. That's also another little trick. Like to get those cold so that they can go in nice and easy. So that's in the freezer getting cold. When we heat up our main bearing, we'll be able to drop it right in. All of our transmission's been inspected and all ready to go. We have new gaskets. And then one of the really cool things we have this huge full spec bolt kit. This is for the entire engine. So we're going to have these cool looking heads on all of our, and we'll have close-ups of all those as we go to put this thing together. We're going to have new bolts in this thing, V-force reed cage. We're going to get this whole engine together, and Brad's going to give us a few tips along the way on things to look for, like just little tips on when you're doing your own 2-stroke, things to look for and to make sure are all good. As you can see, our cases are already cleaned up. You feel them, there's no burrs, no gaskets left. It's ready to assemble. And that's kind of what we've been doing. This has been going on for a few months because we've been doing a lot of other projects, but we've been rounding up all these parts. And then after this step of the process, we'll show this thing going back into the frame and finishing up, which should be really cool. Frame's already been powder coated, and we're finishing up sourcing all of our suspension stuff. We've updated the suspension components, and so this should be pretty fun. So let's get a look at Brad putting this thing together right now.
We're going to assemble the transmission now. All right, the stuff is already cleaned, ready to go. I use Yamabond 4 to assemble the cases. Stuff works really good. Don't be too generous with it because you don't want crap just falling all inside, but put a nice bead all the way around. With your hand, and we set it right here. Get it nice and high. There we go. Works. There we go. Easy peasy. All right, we get the case almost all the way on. I don't want to hit it down, because if you hit it down and get it all flush, it'll actually push silicone out and you'll have a mess. So what we do is get it super close, and then I'll use the bolts to draw it in slowly. Now I just hand tighten these. I just do it by feel. I don't torque these ones. You can if you want. But I've been doing this long enough. Now after I assembled everything, before I move on, I'm gonna check on the shift drum, and I'm gonna shift all the gears and make sure everything's working. Just to make sure we're all solid, no issues. You don't wanna get it all together and all of a sudden it not work. So there's first, neutral, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So we're going good. Put it in neutral, neutral spins fine, we're good. We'll move on to installing the Kickstarter shaft, the clutch basket, and the primary gear. Use a little assembly lube on the bearings. Not a lot. Some people get carried away with that. Don't get carried away. So here I got the primary gear installed, the idler gear for the Kickstarter gear, Kickstarter shaft, the shift shaft's installed. Now we're going to put the clutch in.
Pick it up and set it down. I keep hitting my head on the air.
So I like using little bit of Loctite on the threads for the output shaft here. I just didn't want him walking around. 30. Look at that, we're both wrong. I thought it was 20, but that's why I grabbed the 30, because it kind of looked like it. After tightening the shaft bolt on the clutch, just spin it, make sure it's freely and not frozen up or anything. It should be free. And you're good to go. Put the clutch in. All right, when you tighten these down, make sure you don't over tighten these bolts because they'll break. They're really easy. Torque these to about 6 foot-pounds and you should be good to go. When you're putting the case on, you have the water pump gear and the power valve gear or exhaust gears here. So as you get it close, you'll notice there's still a gap. You want to turn this a little bit just to get it locked into place. And then you just keep working it on until it's on there, which it is now. All the way on. All right, so we got the whole clutch cover installed. I'm gonna do the water pump now. Now that the water pump's assembled, clutch cover's on, looking really good, we're gonna move to the stator side. When installing the stator, from the factory, they don't put any silicone inside the rubber grommet. So add a little bit of silicone in there and that'll help keep the water out of the side cover. So now we're gonna move on to putting the cylinder and piston on.
Are there marks on there that you
Yep.
put the stator on?
Yeah, I guess I should have said that, huh?
Just say something about it right now.
Inside on the stator cover, you have a little on the, where it mounts together, you got a little line on the case, and there's 4 lines on the stator itself where you can adjust the timing. I always run it in the middle. It does change if you do change it. It's like get you a little more bottom, or you could change it higher, get you a little more top. I run it in neutral, so it's pretty much dead center. That's the best way to run it. Is that good?
Perfect.
Cool. Now what am I doing? Oh, piston. We don't need to show that box, do we?
Just put the box out front for a second while you're talking about pistons, and just have the box sitting there. Don't even mention the name, just because he said he got it for free.
Like over here?
Yeah, just like that.
Have me a flathead, the little flathead right there. It's that little one with the black handle.
Just talk about like what would be important about installing maybe the piston circlip or something, whatever trick you have.
Okay. I have no trick.
What is that coated with?
Teflon?
It is Teflon.
Yeah.
Does it end up wearing out?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. But it does help though. I've ran them with it and without on my race bikes, and the ones with last longer.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so now we're gonna put the piston on. So Tom Morgan already dialed this piston into the cylinder. So he sent me a little paper saying the ring gap was already good. And we're gonna move on, putting the circlips in. Now when you put the circlips in, try not to bend them. If you bend them, throw them away, get new ones. Don't try to reuse them. They're kind of a pain to get in, so I use a little flathead, put them at an angle and pop them in. All right, that's in there. And so on the pistons, on the top, you'll have an arrow. Arrow always goes towards exhaust. No matter what bike it is, arrow is always exhaust. The new Yamahas that are turned around, arrow is to the exhaust. Make sure you always put that in correctly. I'm gonna put a little assembly lube on the bearing. Not a lot, just a little. Just a tiny, tiny bit. Find it. There you go. And always double check, push in there and make sure your circlip is set. Line them up. And then on the pistons, there's dowel pins inside of where the rings go. So make sure you turn this and get it. There's a ring right here. And the bottom one's right here. So you want to center those as you put the cylinder on. All right, base gasket. Now we're going to install this piston in the cylinder. I use a little bit of assembly lube around the rings. Just a little bit. Do not get carried away with this. Some people get really carried away with it. So I use a little bit of 2-stroke premix oil and to coat the cylinder, not a lot again. Here we go, it's good. You can see it's all nice and wet in there. Let's see if I can get it the first time. Look at that. You'd think I know what I was doing. There we go. Now we'll rotate this, and you can see all the oil has moved to the top. It's really smooth. Ooh, nice. So we got a head here that's modified by Tom Morgan. He put a compression release. You just pull the little lever and kick it, and it's gonna kick like a 125. As soon as it starts, it'll suck this back in, and you'll have back to a 500. Came out nice. All new washer. So, like, you know, I don't know. I've heard some people. So right here, I'm taking a bump stop for the power valve exhaust arm that goes straight across. You can see the difference here. This one is much larger. What it's doing is it's stopping the power valve from flapping too far over. It stops it right in place. With the OEM one, it wears down and starts opening too far. Installing the V-Force reeds, you have to shave the little rubber pieces off that go right here. So you take them off, shave it down, and you're good to go. Okay.
Okay, so that's the easiest and fastest engine I've ever rebuilt because I had Brad do it. So it took about 3 hours, and I think he had like a good 2 hours worth of work done before we started because the cases were cleaned up, bearings in, seals, all that, and a lot of prep work. So that's important to have all that stuff cleaned up and ready to go. Things took a little longer because when you switch the bolts, you know, it takes a little longer to make sure you have the right length bolts and everything. You want to make sure all your bolts are the right length. Nothing's going to bottom out or be too short. If you're too short, you're going to pull threads out of the case. Don't want to do that, of course. Also, when we did this custom case here, we did have an issue where the basket wasn't clearing this weld. So whenever you're doing anything like this, there's going to be a little customizing potential. So had to grind a little bit on that inside case to make sure that it was clear and refit it back up. So that was our only little hiccup in this whole process. So and now we're going to be ready for our next step. We're excited to get this thing in the frame. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit on putting together a two-stroke KX500 engine. Hope that helps you out. And check us out on the next one to see this thing going together.